any part of it is seam grip,
Yes.
where you're technically on two sliding surfaces at the same time, and they just push you into each other.
Yes. I will figure. Yeah, I haven't ever tested it, but there are the flat surfaces on the side of the rock. Like, where you would fall if you went too far trying to do the tip jump. See, I don't know if you can, if you stand there because it's flat or because of sim grip. I might as well test it out.
It's not easy to say for sure.
Yeah.
I do know that if you get to the other side and then jump back down and drown, then you will respawn on the other side.
Yes.
There's no concern there.
Okay, so I think the best visual cue you can use for your jump here is the lantern. Like, you want to jump right before it or right next to it so you don't hit the... how do you call this?
The fence?
Yeah, the fence.
Yeah, that's pretty much what I go by.
Yeah.
I try not to jump too early, but it's quite forgiving. The main thing you don't want to do is jump too late, because then you hit the fence, and at that point you have to swim all the way around to reset it.
You can occasionally, if you react fast enough to hit the fence, you can occasionally like wall jump and air tackle, but you have to be pretty tight about it.
Yeah. One thing I used to... when I was first learning this, I would try to jump off of the fence. Like jump on and then jump right off, but that's way too precise, so I stopped doing that quickly. But if you could do that consistently, it would make the swim a lot easier, I guess.
Yes, it definitely will be a lot easier.
Beyond that, I've tried jumping from a few other places to see if there's any other ways you can start it. Not that they would be faster. But as far as I can tell, this is pretty much the only location that gets you to the corner there in time before Ami drowns.
Yeah, and it also helps that it's not aligned with the rock. It's just in the place where you can go diagonally, so the current helps you when you're trying to get there.
You still have to swim against the current in most cases. Although, one thing I started doing later on is that I would, rather than jumping towards the rock from this location, I would jump upstream a bit.
Yes.
To make sure that I would be able to swim straighter across the river.
Yeah,
rather than having to swim into the current.
That's something I noticed, and at least going by the air capacity you get to time it, because I've never actually timed it properly, but I've noticed that you can consistently get better air capacity when you get to the corner with that method. So it's probably unintuitively the fastest way to get to the other side, to not jump towards the rock, but a bit against from it to be held by the current.
Yeah. I mean, imagine if someone ever made a task of this, then they'd have to figure out the exact optimal positions for everything.
Yeah.
But it probably would be at least a bit upstream.
Yes.
And of course, you wanna hold jump when you do the jump, because that makes you jump farther.
Yes.
Small detail, but that applies everywhere in Okami.
Except in tablet skip, where you don't actually want to jump.
Tablet skip is extremely precise, because you don't want to jump too high. But here, things are a lot more analog.
Okay, so the angle is probably a bit more like this, and you want to keep that angle a bit while you swim. And once you get close enough, I think you can pretty much just start swimming towards the rock and stop mashing to get.
Ideally, you choose an angle so that Ami swims straight to the corner.
Yes.
But you know, what I usually do is I pan the camera up a bit and look at the corner so that I can adjust, which is similar to what I do when going to a sunken ship. Another thing to note that's really important here, that's not particularly obvious, is when you do the corner jump to get onto the rock, corner jumps literally do not work if Ami is in the like a skipping animation when you press the jump button in the water, which is what you want to be. You want to be mashing that as you swim across the river because it makes you swim faster. But once you approach the rock, if you're in that animation, Ami will never corner jump. So you have to literally stop it a bit early to make sure you corner jump as early as possible.
Yes, like so.
Yep.
So once you're up here, it's pretty lenient, like the amount of jumps you have to do, and well, as soon as you get the seam grip, you're safe. So once you get a seam grip, your air will refill, so you don't have to worry about slipping to the water. But the first time you get here with really low air capacity, you have to worry a bit to get a seam grip or any sort of jump to get yourself on the rock so you get an air refill. Otherwise, you will probably drown after falling to the water. And you want to climb up to this kind of triangle that is here. And this is pretty much the ideal place to be, but you can be a bit lower.
I judge it by where the texture starts to turn a bit more greenish than gray.
Yes, like around here.
Right around there is when you can start doing the jump to the slippery slope.
So this is pretty much the limit, but if you want to be safe, you can do it from this triangle. And you can also do it from around here. Not there, but here you can still make it work. I messed it up, but it is still possible from this sim.
From that bit in the back where you can stand, it's possible. It's just pretty obnoxious, so I usually try to get out of that little crevice.
And there's also real weird collision around here which you can hit during your jumps and it can ruin you, like this. It can ruin the angle of your jump, so you have to be a bit careful around that.
Something that can happen sometimes when you're in that seam there is Ami will sort of like vibrate back and forth. I'm not sure exactly what causes that. It's sort of like glitchy seam grip, but it can cause you to, like, when you jump, you might suddenly like slide away from the wall that you're trying to wall jump off of, and you won't be able to get a wall jump. Which is pretty annoying. Usually if that happens, I sort of wiggle around or do a couple low jumps until it stops happening.
Yeah, and a quick way to rearrange yourself if you get that is just do a low jump and a tap wall jump, and you can just reposition yourself, and usually you can get in a very good position to get the next part of the trick.
Yeah.
And once you're out here, it's not too hard to get to this part if you know your timings, but a quick way to get to this wall is to, wherever you are, do a dash tackle sort of away from this wall, like try to go in this direction to do a tackle jump, and that should give you enough speed and height to get to the place where you can wall jump.
Yeah, this is what I started doing pretty much all the time after I figured it out. You basically do a sliding ground tackle almost perpendicular to this wall that you're trying to jump off of. But the reason why you don't ground tackle straight towards the wall is because when you try to do a jump off a sliding ground tackle, if you're like on the slope that you're trying to jump off of, what'll usually happen, or at least often, is Ami will do a jump with like almost no forward momentum, and I'm not sure exactly why that happens, but if you do the sliding ground tackle so that when you jump, Ami's like already off the slope and in the air, then she always jumps with full momentum. So as long as you're already pointing the analog stick back towards the wall, Ami will jump full speed towards the wall, and you can get your wall jump pretty much every time. So it's a lot more reliable than trying to like just jump towards it and nail the timing.
And also, once you get any wall jump, it doesn't matter if it looks too low. If it does look too low, just try to hold jump as much as possible, and whatever wall jump you get, it will get you up here to the final slope. And this is where the trick gets really interesting, which is the actual trick. The rest of this was mostly just the way to get here. So
yeah, so this piece here, in my video I called it the nameless part just because I couldn't figure out a good way to refer to it.
In my script, I refer to this as quote unquote the trick, because this is just it.
Yeah, this is basically where you set up the actual important part of the whole trick.
Yes.
So this is where it starts.
And this trick, like this part, has you could very easily separate it into, I think, 7 total parts, and I'll try to go by one. The first one is getting this wall jump right here. It can be a bit clunky to get. It's mostly feel-based. There are some methods to get a consistent wall jump. I personally wouldn't recommend a lot of these wall jumps because they can not give you enough height. Like, the easiest way to get any wall jump here is to just do a tap jump into this part, and you can easily get a wall jump there. But this it can get you in a very bad position to get to the tip of the rock.
What sometimes happens to me here is like I'll try to wall jump off this bit repeatedly and I just won't get it, and you'll just see Ami do repeated hops and it looks a bit funny.
Yeah,
the general method I go by here is that I'm trying to get on the part of this the nameless part, this slippery slope here, that's closer to the cliff, like the right half of it from this perspective.
Yeah.
And I do sort of like a low jump facing very slightly leftish, and then I try to time my wall jump either like at the peak of my low jump or like pretty close to the pretty like just afterwards, basically. So around there, and it's very much so by feel. I can't say a precise timing or method for this.
Yeah,
the important part is that your wall jump be max height.
Yes.
Your ground jump doesn't have to be. You don't really want it to be max height, or you'll have a really hard time getting the wall jump, in my experience. But you also don't necessarily need it to be minimum height. In fact, it might be a bit easier if it's just above minimum height. Because in general, after this wall jump, you want pretty much as much height as possible so that you have more time to position yourself for landing on the very tip of the rock here.
Okay, so the wall jump, you can pretty much get anywhere like on this part of the rock. You want your wall jump to be on this side, on this face, and on around this area. It's kinda lenient where you get it. It doesn't matter as much, just to have it close to this other face of the rock, which is the one that will be important in the next part. So once you get the wall jump, what you're gonna do is land on the tip, not that way. Oh. That probably would have worked.
In general, what I do to try and land on the tip, my default method is I make sure that the wall jump is pretty much neutral, so that I don't have any like horizontal momentum already off the wall jump, and then I do try to do like pretty much 3 taps, give or take, towards the seam, or like towards the tip of the rock or the seam that you can land on, and that's pretty much the most reliable method I get. But then I adjust it from there based on how I'm feeling.
Yeah, I personally don't have any consistent method. For me, it's feel-based. I had never really thought of a way to do it consistently. I have thought of maybe thinking up a way to get the consistent tap jump with brush buffering, but it will probably be really slow.
Yeah, the issue with trying to use brush buffering here is, even if you could do it, the starting position for the wall jump is inconsistent because you're jumping from a slippery platform. So there's not really a good way of getting a landmark to start a setup from, unlike with tab skip where it's a lot more usable. So in this case, it's really very much so by feel. It took me a lot of practice over weeks to start getting it reliably. But even then, even before I felt I was good enough to really do it in runs, I was doing it in runs just because that's part of the practice.
Yes.
Understanding the context in which you do it.
I think this took me to get consistent, although I'm pretty slow at getting new tricks, so this probably won't be the case for most people, but for me to get this consistently, it took me about 25 to 30 hours of total practice on city checkpoint skip. But that was part of that was also figuring out a camera angle that works for me, which is something that we should probably touch on, which is that the camera angle
there's a lot
is
of
up to you.
Different camera angles you can use at this point of the trick. Usually you'll want to have set up your, like, this is where you set up your camera pretty much at the latest, is once you're on the slope. Because it's pretty easy to maintain Ami being on the slope. It's not that slippery. It's but like once you're here, or at least before you're here, you'll have the camera in an angle you like to do the rest of the trick from, because you're not going to have time during the rest of the trick to adjust the camera. It just, everything happens too fast.
So general guidelines to adjust your camera is that if you're in this area of horizontal alignment, that's the word in English, alignment, you want to have your camera mostly as down as possible so that you can get a clearer image of the tip that you want to land on.
Yes, so I position the camera physically as high as possible, looking as far, like, as much down as possible, just because that gives you the best visibility, the best ability to tell spatially where Ami is relative to everything else. Yeah, so you don't want it to be horizontal, because that only really helps you see height, and height is pretty easy to judge just by feel.
And, well, common camera angles, well, this is not a... You can't really say common camera angles, because there are only about 6 people in the world that do this trick consistently. So this is one of them that was done by mostly Khan, which doesn't give you a clear image of the tip, but it will give you a clearer image of the rest of the trick. This is the one that most people use, as far as I know, which is a mixed one that gives you a clear-ish image of the tip, but also gives you a clear-ish image of the rest of the trick. It makes it so that the second wall jump, which we'll be covering later, is not completely blind. And the last camera angle that I know that other people do, because I do it, is this one that gives you a clear image of the trick, of the tip, but basically you have to do the later half of the trick blind.
Yeah, the way I think about camera angles here is that there's a few different things you would like to keep your eye on, and it's just, you have to compromise your camera angle based on what's most important to you. So, like, you want to know where Ami's going to land, but you also want to know where you're going to do the next wall jump from, and you also want to know where you're going to do the air tackle bounce from. So you'd like to see the tip of the rock. You'd like to see the seam behind that tip of the rock that you can still land on. You'd like to see the, like, jutting out piece of the cliff, and you'd also like to see the top of the cliff, but you can't see them all at once. So this is pretty close to the camera angle I use, maybe a bit facing more towards the right. But I don't like it so that, like, if you rotate a bit to the left, like this, the seam behind the tip of the rock is too hard to see. It gets too small, basically, so you can't see where along it you would be landing. So I want it to be a bit wider, just so I can see, like, based on Ami's shadow as she falls, where along the tip she's going to land. So that helps me adjust the position. But if you do that, then your angle towards the jutting out piece of the cliff is very hard to judge, because you can't see the jutting out piece of the cliff at all. So that's basically by feel. You use other guidelines to judge it. But then once it comes into view, you have enough time to react to do the wall jump before Ami can no longer wall jump off of it.
So once you get the tip jump, what you want to do is you want to do an air tackle, well, a ground tackle jump towards this part over here. You can get it on this part of the collision or on this flatter part of the collision. Both work. Oh, well, that was funny. But it can be harder to execute the rest of the trick if you do it on this part, because you'll be blinded and you'll have to do a harder directional input to get you to where you want to be.
It's shaped sort of like the hull of a ship, like the front of it. So there's sort of two halves, and the left half, the half that's farther from the part that you're trying to land on, you can jump off of it probably more easily, I think. But then you have further to navigate around the very tip of the hull of the ship before you can get to the position that you need to air tackle bounce off of. And the longer you have to take in the air, the more likely you are to not have enough height to do the air tackle bounce onto the cliff to complete the trick. So I tried generally to wall jump right on the seam between the two halves of the jutting out bit.
As you can see, my controller is malfunctioning.
I see.
And it's
Disconnect,
alive.
reconnect.
Yeah, I just disconnected it and connected it again. Okay, so sort of a rule of thumb, which the way you want to do this first tackle dash is that if you have this particular camera angle, the visual cue you can use to angle your grounded tackle is this line. You kind of want to do it along this line or in that direction, because that's pretty much the alignment that gets you towards this. And since in these camera angles you're mostly doing that blind because you cannot see this, it helps to have a visual cue to guide yourself. So you get the tip jump, you tackle. Oh, that was terrible. It's really hard to do this trick while explaining it because it requires a lot of concentration. I'm getting a terrible angle on my dash tackle. Tackle jump. That words are getting mixed up in my brain.
Yeah, it's what most games would call an air dash or something like that, but then, like, as far as I can tell, the game's official text pretty consistently uses tackle to describe what you do with the I guess the left face button, the Y button on a Switch Pro controller. So that's what I ended up calling it.
And since we also use the word dash for other things, it helps to have a different name for tackles. So ideally you do that jump tackle jump. What? That's yeah. And after the tip jump, you want to do it basically immediately.
Yeah, as soon as you land, and like you don't want to do this on reaction. You want to do this sort of prepared for the timing. As soon as Ami lands and gets the splash of green indicating that she got a grounded landing, you need to do a ground tackle towards the part of that jutting out bit that you're trying to jump off of, and then you need to jump. You'd like to jump out of your ground tackle as late as possible, so that you get as much distance towards that rock as possible, because that gives you more time to react with. But it's not that strict on timing. If you do the ground tackle jump right away, then you're probably not going to make it. So that's something to look out for if you're doing your jump out of the ground tackle too early.
Yeah, so this next part is really hard to explain because it happens very fast. I'll try to do a part by part, stopping with the brush, but that will make me fail it most likely, like fail the rest of the trick due to losing the timing. But you do the air tackle, you do the tackle and then the jump, and then you do this wall jump. And once you get this wall jump, depending on where you got the wall jump, right here I got pretty much the best spot on this camera angle. You want to do directional inputs to move yourself towards the cliff, which didn't quite work out for me there.
In that camera angle, I would have held like pretty much down, and then I would have curved Ami to the right to get in position.
Yeah, so
and then when Ami's at the peak of the jump before she falls, you want to air tackle like up and slightly to the left so that you bounce towards the right onto the cliff.
So, it really depends on where you get the wall jump, but most of the times you're just gonna do either a half circle or a quarter circle with your stick, depending on where the wall jump is. There it would have been a quarter circle from down to right. But if I got the other possible wall jump, it would have been a half circle from left to right, going down. I'll try to get it. So in this particular camera angle, it's a bit not so intuitive when to time your tackle or what the angle is. But in general, you want to do your tackle in such a way that it is not too perpendicular to the cliff, because if it's too perpendicular, then you won't get it at all, because you'll just slide off the wall instead of hitting it. But if it's too parallel, the animation will not put you over the cliff. It will just... Well, there I got it because I'm too high, but it will usually not get you on here. You'll probably hit the collision but slip and not land on top. Once you do get this, that's something that will happen also. Once you get the air tackle, it's actually a pretty fast timing, but you can immediately start holding directional inputs towards the cliff, which can make most tackles work there. Sometimes it won't, because the rest of the trick or the tackle timing was just not good enough. There's a leniency of about... Well, there's about a 3-frame window for you to do your tackle. I actually haven't properly checked it. I've done a bit of frame data analysis on it, but it depends on how good the rest of the trick you did was. So if you do everything perfectly, you have about even a 5-frame window to do your tackle. But if you do everything wrong, or just good enough to get you to the last part of the trick, it can be frame perfect. But in general, as long as you get there, you can make any setup work, as long as your timing and angle on the tackle are good. And that's the hard thing about the tackle, is that you have to both angle it and time it. And the hard part about the angle is that it's usually not in the same direction that your stick is gonna be by the time you get there, because in this camera angle in particular, you wanna be like doing a half circle from down to left, but then you wanna do your tackle holding exactly up. And that's the hard thing, because you wanna get the movement perfect to get yourself on the right position, and then you wanna immediately flick your stick from right to up to get it.
Yeah, in general, the rule in Okami for air tackle bounce is you can be like, there's a fair amount of leeway in the angle you can hit the wall with, and that determines the angle you bounce off with, and that's why it's all very important. You don't want to be straight perpendicular into the wall, because then you won't bounce far enough to the right in order to land on the cliff, and you don't want to be facing too far left, or you won't be perpendicular enough to the wall for Ami to actually do the bounce at all. She'll just like sort of slide along the cliff face.
Something that I myself suffered from when I was first practicing this trick is that the timing on this tackle can be unintuitive, and you can see that there I just slid off even though my angle was good. That's because it was too late. It was basically 1 or 2 frames late out of the proper window which you can get it on, which is what I mean when I say that the timing is not intuitive, because if you have never done this trick, you can probably not tell that the timing was late. It probably just looks like I somehow, for whatever reason, didn't bonk at all. But it's because I'm in a part of the collision that is already below the cliff, and it's curved enough that Ami can never bonk there, which is around here. Like, if you bonk and you are, it's not that it's bad to be below the cliff, you can still get it if you're below the cliff, but if in particular around here, or if you do it too late, like too down or too close, the collision is weird and you won't get the bonk at all. You can still also bonk in places that aren't so intuitive and still get this, or look like it's too late, but it's actually the proper timing, as long as it's around the peak of your jump. Oh, hello. So around here is a place where you can bonk if your angle is good, because the thing is that bonks in this game are kind of pretty OP. Not only do they give you a lot of distance, but they also give you a lot of height, and it's deceptively a large amount of height, since that rollback animation can end up making Ami land on the cliff. I'm gonna try to make it work. That was too late. So the timing on the bonk is pretty tight. That's the harder part. The angle you can, by having a consistent camera angle, that's the most important thing when practicing this, is to have a consistent camera angle so that the directional inputs stay the same and you can only have to worry about doing them always in the same way. Well, not always in the same way, just particularly for that bonk. But just practice the timing for things like that. So I want to show off this. Like, you see, there I was below the collision. It probably happened too fast, but I was below the collision in such a way that the game even made my camera be like blocked. I don't know how to show it up. The game even did this with the camera because I was that much below the cliff, but I still managed to get a bonk that got me under because the direction was good enough and the timing was good enough. Overall, this trick can, once you practice it a lot, can wind up being surprisingly lenient. It's just that the leniency is spaced out, so the tighter you are in different parts, the less tight you have to be in others. For example, there, I had basically perfect everything except for my bonk. My bonk was like a couple frames too late, but I still got the trick because everything was super tight before that. And you can tell I was a bit late on the bonk because I slid off the wall a bit. So I initially hit the part of the wall that's curved in a way that Ami can't tackle on that angle. But I was so high because of how good my wall jump and movement was that I still hit a part of the wall that you can bounce off. Other than that, there's really a lot to talk about City Checkpoint Skip, but we've pretty much covered everything that there is to cover. If anything, we didn't talk a lot, well, not too much, about the movement once you get the second wall jump. But it's pretty intuitive, at least up to the timing of the bonk. Just doing the circle, or half circle or quarter circle, depending on where you get it. Although I haven't got a bad wall jump angle to show off the half circle movement. I'll try to get it. things to keep in mind while practicing city checkpoint skip is that you have to also practice how to recover, because in the end we are human and we will fail this and we will mess up several parts of it. So you can recover from pretty much any mess up really easily. The worst of the mess ups are when you land too far or when you go too far on the tip jump. So let's say instead of getting the tip jump, you get the tip jump on this direction. So when you get that, I'll read it again because I was too fast on recovering. I did it intuitively. So when you get a bad tip jump or get no tip jump at all in this direction, sometimes if you do get it, you can recover if you jump fast enough. You can recover quickly, but if you don't get a tip jump at all or don't get it fast enough, you'll probably fall over here. And don't waste your time too much doing this thing I'm doing right here, because this is really slippery, and since the sims are really bad, it's really hard to actually get up there. It's better to just drop down on the water and sink and swim back. There are other things or other ways that you can fall there. That's pretty much the worst case scenario, but believe me, it will happen, especially when you are new to practicing this. So if that happens, don't waste your time too much trying to get the green hops back. Just drop down to the water and swim back. The not so bad scenario is when you fall there. So if you fall there, you can pretty much green hop over to this sim grip over here. And once you're here, you can either swim. Well, if you don't get the green hop on that collision, you can just swim back. You're already pretty close and you don't lose that much time. So you get you fail the green hop, you just come over here and you get enough air that you can fail the sim grip. Well, if you sleep and don't get the sim grip, it doesn't matter too much, you probably won't drown. Okay, so the other scenario, you do get the green hop and you land here. Here you can pretty easily time a tackle jump and into a wall jump, which will get you pretty high, and you only really have to do one wall jump over here to get yourself back on the proper spot. And yeah, that's pretty much all the ways in which you can fail it towards that direction. You can... I don't see how this can happen, I don't think it has ever happened to me, but if you fail it towards this direction because you fumble directional inputs, you can get back pretty easily. If you don't get the tip jump, which is what will happen most often, well, so if you don't get the tip jump but get on the right side of the cliff, since you want to do, you don't want to do the tackle jump on reaction, you always want to do it. So if you align your tackle in the right direction, you'll get an air tackle in that direction if you don't get the tip jump, but it will drop you pretty much exactly where you want to be to get back on the rock, so it shouldn't be too much of an issue. There, like so. And you can get back up immediately. For other parts of the trick, let's say you get the tip jump, the air tackle, but fail the wall jump. You fail the wall jump. You have a window in that particular place to green hop and get back to this part of the rock at least. I'll try to show it off if I get it. I didn't quite get it, but I got a decent recovery. So if you get a tackle jump of that green hop, you can get immediately back on the second to last slippery slope.
Yeah, it's worth going for, but it doesn't always work out. Usually I'll just, like, mash the jump button a few times as I'm falling there, just in case. Or the tackle button, I mean.
Yeah, if you get the jump or a wall jump, you can get there pretty easily, but not consistently. Just if you get it.
Another way you can do saves is sometimes when you try to get the tip jump, you'll get the ground tackle, but your ground tackle will have like no momentum. It'll feel like you're going really slowly. And in those cases, you can usually just do your jump out of the ground tackle back onto the last slippery slope.
But then again, it's pretty feel-based. When you get that, you have to have had some experience, because it gets to the point where you can tell when your tackle doesn't have enough momentum to make it. Sometimes when you fail the very last part of the trick in the bunk, you can get a window to green hop when you're slipping down, but it's pretty inconsistent. Well, that's pretty much everything I wanted to cover for today. I don't know if you have anything more to add, Auride.
No, there's nothing in particular, I don't think.
Yeah, this ended up... Oh, continue.
When you're practicing this, like once you get the trick for the first time, it's pretty easy to just jump back down onto the final slippery slope and just sort of grind it out. And that's pretty good for just practicing the hardest part of the trick, but you should also try to practice things like the swim across the river to make sure you don't mess that up in runs, because that wastes a lot of time, as well as like the climb up the rock, although you'll get enough practice from that just by, you know, falling down.
Yes. Yeah, and if once you do get it for the first time, do enjoy that moment. It's a very hard trick, but don't enjoy it too much. Like, don't worry too much about dropping back. It can feel bad to think about practicing this once you're up there and you have to drop back down, because it really does feel like an accomplishment the first time you get it. But don't worry too much about it, you'll get it again. And eventually it will come naturally. Yeah, so just dash jump, tackle jump, and get back on this spot, so you can practice the hardest part. And when you've already got it and are trying to get consistent, try to mess around with camera angles that work better for you. Try to record your attempts and analyze them. That's very important, because well, the important thing is to practice, and not practice a lot, but to practice in a smart way, so that you can really understand the trick. It's a really hard trick to really understand. There are a lot of intricacies to it, since, as I have mentioned, just this part, like the hardest part, you can easily separate into a total of 7 parts, and if any one of those parts goes slightly more wrong than it should, it will ruin everything else. So don't worry too much about messing it up, and do enjoy whenever you get it. Well, thanks a lot for jumping into voice chat, Auride.
No problem.
Yeah. Hope you have a nice day. I'm gonna just cut the stream right now.